Good morning, everyone. Welcome. This is Angela Coulter and
Sarah Sieg Avignoni.
bringing you this week's Ascended World. And this week, interestingly, what has come up is the guilt of success, right? Or the guilt of not being shitty. Excuse my French, but I mean, we laugh about that, but I can't tell you how many I spoke with last week who said the same thing. Well, I felt a little guilty because I wasn't negatively affected by this particular thing.
Right.
Right.
Well, and we've conditioned ourselves to so readily jump to taking credit for all the negative in our lives and
Mm-hmm.
all the okay, I take responsibility. I love the struggle. I love the suffering. I love this, but I don't see anybody really stepping up and saying, "Yeah, I created that success for myself. I did." It's like, "Oh well, I thank God for this." Well,
Mm,
that's not quite, not quite getting it because
yeah.
I don't think you've acknowledged that you are God.
Right. Well, that's right. And we were talking about that. Yeah, last night is like, well, when you say, well, God took care of me, it's like, well, I am God, so that means I did take care of me, which means I created this, which
Right, but
is
you're not quite bringing it that full circle.
right. Right.
Yeah.
And so we identify so much with like the negativity. So with last week, the context a lot of times had to do with, say, like in Texas where you are, and the wacky weather thing that
Right,
happened.
right. I mean, I had a nice warm house. I had no frozen pipes. My pool essentially came through unscathed, and I felt guilty for claiming responsibility for that, or even acknowledging that I played any part in it.
Right.
And it was interesting. I know someone mentioned, well, I don't think I lost power because I was on a hospital grid. And I was talking to my husband about that, and he goes, they don't take that into consideration because hospitals, in order to actually operate, have to have generators to go for days
Right.
with no electricity because it can't be guaranteed. So I'm not sure they took that into consideration, but
Right.
that was kind of a side note.
Well, but no, it's a good example because we sit there and say, "Good morning, Yasmin." We say that and we'll make excuses, or we'll say, "Oh, I'm so lucky," right?
Absolutely.
I'm so fortunate.
Right.
Which it's not that that's bad to say it's I'm so fortunate,
Right.
but usually it's with the intention of saying, "Oh, I'm so lucky that this happened."
And I
Um,
and I know I felt like I didn't want to jinx it. I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want to, because I was like, because I don't want to do that. I don't want
right,
to do the icicles from the ceiling and sheetrock everywhere, and I was afraid to say anything because I
right,
didn't want to jinx myself.
right. Which is a belief in itself, and then you create the opportunity for that, right?
Right.
In doing so. And so like, we started like and I talked to multiple people in Texas last week who said the same thing. Like, okay, well, almost felt guilty for the fact that I enjoyed myself because, we
Right.
hardly ever get snow. And, like somebody I
And it
know,
was beautiful.
yeah, and somebody we know, it's like, well, I'm gonna video myself, sledding with my kid, and then, oh, well, maybe I shouldn't put that up because people are gonna think badly of me because I'm having fun when others are
Right.
having, horrific stuff. And then others that, like so many, and then another, oh well, I had no power for like 10 hours and then it was fine. But never even got all that cold in my house. So obviously, I have good insulation. This is the like
Right.
discussions that I had. And then I was like, and I almost felt bad because, like I went out and played in the snow and had a good time and
Right.
blah, blah, blah. And everybody is, talking about massive issues with their houses, with their pools, with whatever. And
Well, and it also reminds me of a call you and I did. It was like a reunion call, and everybody wanted to
oh yeah,
go to go to the this COVID year and how hard it's been, and we weren't. we didn't have that to say. It was, this has been a great year. It's been such a time for inner reflection, and we've traveled, we've continued with our podcast, we've reached milestones with that, and it was very upbeat, and
Nobody knew
everybody else
what
was
to
really
say.
uncomfortable with us.
Well, and it was funny because one person or two people in that call that I knew for sure were having a great success in their life, they
Right,
didn't say anything about it
right,
because you could tell they were uncomfortable with accepting that within themselves. So then the question is, so why do we feel bad about creating a positive experience? And this is going to be really important moving forward, because as we start making this next set of dimensions more real, more tactile, right?
right, right,
Um, we've sort of have these overlays of, I mean, and if you want it, for lack of better terminology, we have like new earth and old earth, right? But
right,
it's a new set and the old set, right? And we have them overlaying each other. So the more of us who come to this place of recognition of our own creation, responsibility for our own creation, come to this acceptance of it, is, I mean, part of it is to claim it. Part of
right.
the whole process and the energy is that claiming and knowing I created this, and
Right.
I'm not gonna write it off to luck. I'm not gonna write it off to, oh well, guilt. I mean, that's what it is guilt,
It
right?
is. It is. It really is. And when I was taking notes of what we talked about, it's almost like, the survivor's guilt. When everyone else dies and you're the one left alive, and how self-destructive people can be with that energy. But I think that it wiggles its way into other parts, and not just when we're looking at big catastrophes like this.
So
It's the part of how you move through your everyday,
mhm,
and only claiming your failures, only only taking responsibility for your failures keeps you in that pattern.
right, right. And if we have this belief that we're not supposed to be too much better off than other people,
Right.
then we're going to
That's
hold ourselves there.
that's like maintaining the lower status quo.
Right.
And it's like, we said, the chain's only as strong as its weakest link. Well, if we're all the weakest link, that's why we're here.
What occurred to me this morning in meditation, good morning, Gloria. Um, what occurred to me in meditation, so you just said survivor's guilt. So you know what else? Do you know what else? And this is such a completely different perception, hit me, is actually when we depart, right? And this is something that I've always had questions about. And it came to me this morning, and that's when I came and I was like, wait, what are we talking about today? I was like, oh, okay, this all comes together, and I understand why this sort of just popped up into my consciousness. Why particular spirits, people hang around people in their family after they've deceased or, transitioned
Right.
out for a while, is because of their guilt that they hold on to, that they're free of this,
Right.
and that they need to hang around with the family or whoever to help them through that tough time, that we maintain that out of the body. That's pretty
Right.
incredible.
Right. And, given my circumstances with Charlie having died just last Monday, I felt that because I, every time I would see something in the house that would remind me of him, which was pretty constant, and I kept saying to myself, he would not want this. He would not want me to be sad when I remember him. And I
Mhm.
felt like I could feel him around me, not understanding, because he died so quickly that I don't think he had a chance to fully let go here,
Right.
to be able to not have that sense of, oh, wait a minute, once he had left his body.
Yeah. And yeah, and so this is started with a dream that I had that really perturbed me when I woke up, and all this sort of came clear in my meditation. And I'm not sure if it happened, if it has happened in another set of dimensions, or some other timeline or lifetime or whatever. But I was with my family in like this really big, really luxurious resort someplace on vacation, and it got taken hostage by some terrorists. This is such a bizarre dream. I don't think I've ever had a dream like this before.
Wow.
So I woke up and I was like, where did that come from? And so we were allowed to be wherever, like as long as we're on the resort property, like, but then like once a day they would be calling, everybody would have to go into this like big ballroom or whatever. And they started killing people. And they would just randomly pick, a dozen names, and they have these demands of the president and da, 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 da. And the funny thing was, in the whole dream, I was never scared. I was never, I was like, okay, it's either going to work out or it's not. Like I totally had that. And then, we would go along our way, and then the next day they do the same thing. And then finally I ran into this guy that I used to work with years and years ago. And we started talking about his situation and whatever. And he had a girlfriend, and then had this other girlfriend, and da da da. And we were talking, and I was helping him with that, all with this stuff going on in the background, right? Because really, in the case of maybe we're all going to get killed, so what does it matter?
Right. Right.
And then at some point I'm like, oh, I need to go find the bathroom. This is just taking too, like, I literally was like, oh, this is just taking too long, right? And I went and found a bathroom, and like there were all these phones, and it was almost like a big inside mall. Maybe think of like a big airport, it has all those like the concourse with all these shops.
Right.
All these phones, then they all started ringing. And somebody picked up the phone and they said, oh, I think this is for you. And I answered the phone, and it was the guy that I worked with. He goes, oh, they just called your name. And I was like, really? And in the dream, I was like, really? And I was really torn between whether I should go to the bathroom first or whether I should just go, right? And I was like, and in that moment, I had such a confusing set of emotions, because it was not that I didn't want to die or that I was like afraid of dying. It was, but my family's here and they're going to watch me die. Like it was more that I was upset for them.
Right.
Than I was for me. And that was when I woke up, and I was so like in this weird place this morning when I woke up, because I'm like, what a weird dream to have. Right.
Right. Yeah.
And then I realized that, oh, well, yeah. And then I was out there and I was like, okay, well, is it guilt of being successful, being in this big, beautiful resort, right? That I'm going to be punished for, like that, to be punished for that, to be punished for whatever, to be a target. Like, so I was doing all this shifting on that. And then finally then it came down to this, seeing the deceased who are stuck with their families or loved ones because they're still holding on to some guilt,
right,
about leaving their families behind, because their families are so connected egotistically to the death and grieving and whatever. And I was like, oh, how did I never see that before?
Right.
And I always said, every time I've gone to cemeteries and connected in to the energy of the cemetery, like pretty much 98% of the time, anything that I feel is the grief and mourning of those who've been left behind, and not the ones who've passed over.
Absolutely. Right. Yeah. And I think that anytime you look at things like in houses that need clearing, it's that. It's not, it's those that have been left behind that are holding someone here.
Yep. So, and so that's like and you think that's different than what we're talking about, but it's not, because we can't even own up to that I'm fine while everything around me is crumbling. And we're going through this extreme
Right.
period right now where we have a lot of stuff crumbling. So whether it's the snow and electricity in Texas this week, or it's the volcano next week, or it's the tsunami the week after that,
Right.
or it's
The poles flipping.
poles flipping, which we're waiting for any moment now.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
And so it's a weird, if we can't even say, or even just having people sick around us, right?
Yep.
And it's not bragging, because then right away we jump to, oh, it's bragging, it's being prideful, right? Which is considered a sin, like all that kind of stuff. But it's truly just saying, how's the conversation go when somebody's going on and on and on about their woes, and you're like, oh, and well, how are you? I'm fine, I'm good.
And the conversation ends.
It does.
Right.
And we have this compulsion, socially, I was going to say sociologically, but no difference.
Right.
We have this compulsion to connect via drama, right?
Right.
One of the
Misery
reasons,
loves company.
right? Oh God, how many times do we say that, right?
Right. Exactly.
And then we finally get to a point where we're not living that. And I mean, I've noticed that, like, one of the biggest habits to break is to not allow yourself to get pulled into that, because at some level you believe, I have to do that. I have to
Right.
drag myself down to be a part of the human condition.
Well, and socially, there's the pressure to do that. And those that are, always stressed and always spread too thin are those that are praised for, oh, look at how much they're doing, look at how much they're giving, look at, and it, that brings up a whole nother level of guilt when you're not participating in that.
Right. Well, because you should feel guilty about having a lot of stuff while other people don't. So therefore you need to sacrifice to do something to hurt yourself, or, or like
Right.
to deplete yourself with
Right.
others. And it's like, wow, that's so coming from this perception of lack, right? It continues that role of, I've got to be in a role of lack to be a part of this whole existence,
Right.
and
Well,
it's not.
and there's so many ways to look at this, because I know here in Texas, the whole politics around the what happened, the
Mhm.
infrastructure or lack of, and then in the middle of it, one of our senators is caught going to Mexico and leaving his dog home in a house without electricity while he flees the country.
Mhm.
So then he comes back, and there are photo ops of him handing out water and stuff in an empty parking lot, and it was all, whatever. But then you get to, okay, here's someone who is agreed to take on the role of supporting his population, so to speak.
Mhm.
And then he has the resources to go somewhere else. So he was creating that for himself. Who's right, who's wrong?
Right.
Or it's all perfect.
Yep. Yep. I think part of the perception is the job, right? Well, the job you're taking is to do this, right? But at the same time,
Exactly. And it's one of those things where it's like, the backlash from that, which comes from a whole different set of circumstances about just the role he's played prior to that. And but still, it's the same thing. It's like, well, he's created this for himself.
right. Right. Well, and it's like this, right? How many times I've had, this is where it becomes really, 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 I don't want to say tricky, but it's a very fine line of consciousness, because we're so used to discounting somebody because, oh, they don't know because they haven't experienced this, right?
Exactly.
So therefore, so we make it a negative and saying, well, look at look at what a great example they are because they didn't choose this to experience. So what is it that they're
Exactly.
doing that I could change that might allow me to free myself of this limitation? Instead, I want to drag you down with me. Well, you
Right.
don't know because you've not had this, so you're a loser because
Well, and you're not, your experience isn't as valuable because you haven't struggled and had to overcome
right,
something.
right, right. Right. And so, and we do that all the time because it's like, okay, for people who aren't married and resent not being married, there's a resentment to, oh, well, you're not married. You don't have to worry about that. Like it's all an all be all end all, like it's the best
Right.
thing. And then people who are married look at people who are single and they're like, oh, well, you don't know the limitations of this and
Right.
because you're not married. I mean, it's like you don't know because you don't have this challenge. So you are not as good as me because you're not as limited as me, which is so
Right.
like anti-intuitive.
Right. Well, and I mean, even if you look at books that are published and success stories and things, nobody wants to read that you were born wealthy. You got your parents paid for your college education. You applied it. You have this great company, and you've made a lot of money. Nobody wants to hear about that. They want to hear about somebody's struggles. They want to hear about what they had to overcome and their journey. Whether
Yes.
and it better be, I went from this extreme to this extreme,
Right.
and we just flock to that
Right.
instead of saying, I chose to create this, easy, gracefully, through joy-filled paths. People are like, what fun is that?
That's boring.
Right, right. I get no sensation with that.
Yeah, I know. And it's, yeah, no, I don't get that. I don't get that, in my heart, and I don't get,
Right.
teary and, like
Exactly.
inspired by, overcoming that suffering. And interesting that we set up lessons based on being examples of that so that people pay attention because otherwise they don't
Right. Right.
traditionally. Now that's shifting, hopefully, but because really, that's really the challenge of like even the Trinity practice, that we do and whatever is that, okay, so it is allowing yourself to have it, to do it easily, right? To do
Easily.
it powerfully and easily without a ton of ritual or ceremony, with the simplicity of the power of allness, right? Of being that whole. And like many are like, that's too powerful.
Or yeah, that's too hard to convince people that it works.
Right. Because it's not like a funny, ritual. Like I don't stand on my head and open
Right.
one eye or whatever.
Right.
But,
And I don't
and I'm
have
not
to
saying
have
that,
this crystal and this incense.
yeah,
And I can only
yeah.
do it on Tuesday if it's a full moon. And
Yes. And there's no judgment on that. It's just that that's what we're addicted to. We're addicted to believing that something's only powerful or good enough if there's some kind of something that we create as a ritual of ceremony or suffering or whatever,
right.
right? Like, like how many things, how many practices, how many even spiritual practices or energetic practices they've done over eons of, oh, you've got to cut yourself. Oh, you've got to, deny yourself. You've got to starve
Right.
yourself for a week. You've got to like do something that is putting yourself in denial or lack to then realize your power on the other side instead of just saying, well, I can just step into that.
Right. Well, it's really funny. I believe we're in the season of Lent. And I saw where the Pope had said, because typically people give up, alcohol or desserts or, TV or, some form of pleasure. And the Pope came out and said, let's give up hate. Let's give up, poverty. Let's give up. And it's like, yes.
Right.
If you're going to deprive yourself of something, let's deprive ourselves of something that is beneficial to everybody.
Right. Right.
And I thought that was an interesting twist, because that if the premise behind Lent is you give up something that's pleasurable to you, I guess he's saying that apparently we find these things pleasurable.
Right. Well, no, and that makes so much sense,
It
really.
does.
That's interesting. Yeah, I hadn't heard that. But yeah, so part of like what there is for us to look at today is our addiction to that um connection and the guilt when we don't have that connection because we're not following that path. We're not following that pattern. And it's interesting because I've had so many conversations where, my understanding, right? And the way, my goal is being present
Right.
in the now, right? Present in the now. The only thing in my understanding that exists is right now. So everything that did not happen in this moment or does not happen in this moment doesn't exist. It's just in my mind. It's in my, the ego creating history or projection into future and all that kind of stuff. So, there's no difference. So I've come to the place where there's no difference to what was 1 minute ago, 5 minutes ago, 50 years ago, 50 lifetimes ago, because it's all just done.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we do so much in bringing everything forward into every moment, right? Of, oh, well, you did this and you didn't do
Right.
this. And let me hear your suffering. Let me hear of your thing. And so I'm like, okay, but if you look at the bigger picture, right? And then we start looking at, well, we're all the same. We're fractals of the same huge, divine consciousness. Well, then I have had your experiences because I'm
Right.
you,
Right.
and vice
Yep.
versa. And okay, so we want to take out logistics of that as well. Okay, even if I'm not suffering now, who says I didn't suffer 20 years ago? Who says I didn't suffer 20 lifetimes ago? What does that make any difference? We've all had
Right.
those experiences. We've
Right.
chosen, we wanted to have them
Right.
here because that's a set of dimensions that we created, and it's great and it's been phenomenal, and we have loved the misery.
Right. We have. We have.
And suffering and and depriving, like I was talking about last week in one of the forums that we discussed, whether it was here or my thing on Thursday or chair or class, I don't even know, it's been such a full week.
Right.
But it's like the realization that we have negative reinforcement when we die, and that's part of why we create suffering at the and the dying process, so that when we are released, we release ourselves from the density of these by this part of our consciousness. It is such a rush. It's like
Right.
it's like a junkie. We get addicted to that too.
Right. Right. Well,
And
and I think part of the reason why we have to set up some catastrophic event to transition is because either we feel guilty for leaving or we love this so much that we don't want to leave, and that we have to enter ourselves into a circumstance that we can't back out of,
right.
or believe that we can't
A
back out
fail
of.
safe sort of.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
Nope, you're gonna know it's time to go, and then you're not gonna want to go, and you're gonna teeter, and you're gonna,
Well, and the judgment of, what do you mean you're just going to go, from those around you? It's like, oh no, we're not having that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. There was a
And
woman.
even if you consider like suicide, people judge people who are committing suicide, or people who allow them to commit suicide. Oh, that's just, it's illegal, and
Well, not
what a
and not only
horrible
that,
person you are.
and how selfish they were for committing suicide.
Right. Right.
How selfish. How many times you've heard that, right?
Right.
It's like, well, our journey is our own.
Right.
Last I
Right.
checked.
Right.
But yeah, there is a individual I was working with who I had worked with, her and her husband a while back, because he had a terminal illness, um and I had said to them multiple times, this is the goal is to come to peace with where you are. And then, yes, can you change it? Absolutely. Will you change it? That's up to you. And if it serves the bigger purpose, if it's a part of the bigger picture to exit this way, then no, you won't change it. And it's not that you failed. It's that maybe it's the importance of coming to peace with where you are and the accepting what you've chosen, so that you don't come back and do it again in the same way.
Right.
Anyway, so fast forward, because I was, I don't know, 5, 6 years ago, and he passed away not too long ago, and his wife came in. She was always so, and the thing that I always worked with her on was how distraught she was, that she had to take care of him. He was always one that took care of everybody else, and all this kind of stuff. And yeah, and so you say that, so I'll say this, and it sounds like I'm judging her, but I'm not. It's what we do, right? There was this anger that she had deep down that he was doing this, right? And that she had to take care of him. She was so tired, blah, blah, blah.
Right. Right.
And I would say to her, well, so then look at your anger at why, you have to take care of him now. Oh, no. And like, cause then you don't want to own up to that. You judge the
Right.
judgment. And it's like, but you don't resolve this until we own up to it and have responsibility for it, to say, okay, well, then what is there for me to shift? Well, anyway, all she would ask me, it was like, well, can he change this? Can he really change this? And I'm like, he can change this, but it's his choice.
Right. Right.
We could do all the energy work in the world. And if he's choosing his path out that way, that is his choice.
Exactly.
And so he passed away, and then she came to see me, and she was all still the same. And she's like, well, I just want to know he's okay. And da, da, da. And I, he was there with her. And it was like, when I tuned into him, all I saw was like sitting in an empty locker room, like sitting on this bench, like he's waiting. Right. And I said to her, I said, well, he's sort of like in this locker room. I said, I don't know what that means. Was he in a sport? She goes, not for a long time. And I said, okay. But it felt like an empty locker room. Like he was sort of just like, tapping his, tapping his fingers. And she was just like, we had, through the discussion, I finally said to her, so, because she told me that when he was on his way out, their kids came and said, go, Dad, go. We don't want you to suffer anymore, whatever. But she said, no, don't go. Stay with me. Right.
Yeah.
So she told me all that. And then I could see him in the locker room. And I said, well, have you let him go yet? And she goes, well, what do you mean? And I said, because I feel like he's sitting in that locker room because he's waiting for you to let him go, because he feels bad.
Right. Yep.
Well, is he okay? I'm like, I said, yeah, he's okay. Of course he's okay. But he's going to be better when you let him go, because he won't be tied here. And it's funny, is that I didn't really connect that until we talked about that now, but that's exactly that connection of like, how dare you? How dare you be free of this? How dare you leave the suffering, And there are people, and we say that like, how would somebody want somebody to stay and be sick and suffer versus be free and, expansive back into the wholeness? Well, it's because we want them to suffer with us.
Right.
We martyrize things, oh, well, and then, we build identities around, oh, well, I'm sacrificing so much to take care of this person, or I'm sacrificing, and it's this codependency that happens. And so there's all of that. And so that's really, really strong situations of that, but we don't realize the subtleties of every day.
Right.
In that, what we say and what we don't say, what we connect with and what we don't connect with.
Well, and it's like, we talk about so much that alignment of thought, word, and deed. And it's like, this is one of those misalignments where, you are saying, I believe that I'm part of the wholeness and I create my reality. And then you kind of go off the rails and only take responsibility for part of it. And it just, it creates that, that warp that leaves us here in separation.
Yeah. And if we don't start claiming our creation, then it will just perpetuate itself.
Right.
Because if you're sitting here looking at a situation saying, oh, well, only the lucky don't have to deal with this. Right. Because I can't tell you how many times I've had people say, oh, well, you're just lucky you have a good immune system and you don't get sick. So I'm lucky, but it's not
by chance.
It's by chance and not my creation, but it is my creation. It's my choice.
Right. and in every choice you make, it's your choice.
Right.
It's that carrying forward with that continuity of all of that all the time, every time.
Yeah. And I mean, I've had my mother say to me, oh, well, you're lucky you just didn't get that, arthritis gene, apparently.
Right.
No, I just changed it. I just changed the need to have it, you
Or
know?
chose not to accept it.
Yeah. Chose not to accept, chose. We can do that. That's what we're doing and remembering our power here.
Right.
And so it's really important for us to scream that from the rooftops, you know, and I'm not saying brag about it, but be very honest about it, because the more we do that, the more people realize, oh, I can claim that for myself.
Exactly. Exactly. Right. Yep.
And we otherwise will just perpetuate the same stuff over and over again. So,
Which
you
is
know,
why we are where we are.
well, and we loved it, right? So,
Right. But let's be done with it.
right, let's do something even better, shall we?
Right. Exactly.
But so I think that's what our focus today is to I allow myself to own my creation, good, bad, and indifferent, like, you know,
Right.
because that's all judgment anyway,
Unconditionally.
unconditionally. And to not, you know, that and I don't want to say proud, but I am at peace with it. I am totally
Exactly.
in
Yes.
acceptance of it.
Right. And have
I
gratitude for it.
and have
All of it.
and I have huge gratitude for it. Yeah. And am an example of it. So to allow others the space to do the same for themselves. Oh, that feels really good.
Yeah. That feels great.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, are we ready?
Yes.
All right, let's go and do that. Anybody who's watching or listening, just close your eyes, take a deep breath, and open your heart to the possibility and the allowance of creating that in your reality. Well, now that I had more resistance than I think any of the other sessions that we've
I
done.
know. I was like, man, there's some serious resistance to this. Yeah.
And I was like, oh no, just let it smooth out. And it got better, but boy, that's going to take some focus this week.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Yep. I would agree. I would agree between all the electronics going off.
Oh, yeah, my cat came in and meowed at me, like, what are you doing?
Don't do that. Don't do that. Right.
Yeah. And what I saw out there was that whole idea of, well, look at that, how we said, I don't want to jinx it, right? Like I was seeing that and
Right.
how like we believe that, it's karma is gonna like we're gonna get if we're having too good of a time, we're gonna get,
Right.
crapped on, so to speak,
Well, and it's like the only reason that this good is happening is because people aren't noticing. And if you
Yeah.
call attention to it, you're going to lose it.
Right. And that was the whole thing that was in my meditation this
Yeah.
morning was feeling like being successful, being visible, having what we consider a successful, happy, whatever life makes us a target.
Right.
And I was like, what?
Yeah.
That was a hidden belief that came up from the depths with a firing squad in my dream. Wild. So yeah, this is a pretty deep one. We'll have to see how
really is.
it transpires this week. We're not really happy to let go of that. That was definitely a collective thing. Like, no, I don't think so. And it's
Right.
I think so. Oh, I'm tingling all over from so. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. So sit with that this week and just take note within yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I was thinking,
hold that awareness.
Yeah. And I was thinking, where in our 28 days would we have something that even attends to this? We sort of missed that. Or would it be
maybe
incorporate?
It's this week.
This week's, right.
Yeah.
Because I did do a forgiveness thing with myself for like believing that, right? For holding myself to that, to holding myself to the requirement of suffering and martyrdom and, and only being allowed to be successful or to have what we consider success or visibility or wealth or whatever with consequences.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Think about how many movies that we have where there's magic involved. And it's like, oh, well, using magic is always has consequences. And it's like, now we're trying to pound that into our heads as we remember how to utilize what we consider magic, which is really just our energy in creation.
Right. Yep.
So be very aware around you and see what is it. I think maybe all of us should come back and do that a whole bunch of times, and maybe that'll help the collective level, because I feel like that's a biggie.
Yep. And this is available for replay. So you can come back and sit through the meditation portion as much as you need or want or feel.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And as our little last minute plug,
that's what I was going to say.
The last week of the month, we have our 28 days forgiveness program, 28 days of forgiveness program, which is such a powerful program that has helped so much and so many. But we're doing it and through the end of the month for only $28. It will still be out there, but it's going to be $128. So, you might as well get it for the $28 while you still can. It's only
That's $1 a meditation.
And it's, 10 to 15 minute videos every day. It's
self-paced.
It's self-paced. There's a workbook involved to do your own, exercises, to do the video together. There's an energy clearing in every video and affirmations for the day and a forum.
And a forum where you've got access to both of us.
Yep.
The whole time. And
each other, where we can all discuss and whatever. And so we will be continuing doing the program after, but it's going to go up to $128. So, which is still a deal, by the way, because honestly, it's worth like $2,800. I mean, it's easily, but so go and do that. $28. Come on. Like the thing is that everyone we know who has been giving us feedback has been like saying how phenomenally powerful it is. And we've been doing it along with ourselves, and we know how powerful it's been. So that's our shameless plug for today. Go to the Ascended World page or ascendedworld.net and go into programs and 28 days of forgiveness and go ahead and sign up, because why not? You're worth it.
Exactly.
And with all of this going on, it actually helps so much.
It really does. Really does.
All right, guys. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week. This is Angela Coulter.
Sarah Sieg Avignoni.
Signing off with this week's Ascended World. Have a great one.